Hey guys, good to see me again, isn't it? Thank you very much. I know we're all ready to start mingling and crack on with the happy hour. I'm out of jokes, by the way, as well. I hit my quota. Boss told me to stop. So, final keynote for the day. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cindy Alvarez. Cindy's the author of Lean Customer Development, Build Products Your Customers Will Buy. She's also a trainer for O'Reilly Media and is currently a principal researcher for Microsoft's developer division. So please give a warm welcome to Cindy.
All right, hello everyone. I know I'm what stands between you and drinks, so we'll try and be high energy here. All right, so one of the things for a conference like this, there have been so many people talking about the things they're doing today that are anywhere from, hey, I remember when my company did that, to, wow, that's really aspirational and it's going to take a long time for me to catch up to Netflix. But after conferences like this, I'm sure we'll have a lot of ideas, but there's a lot of things that are going to take some time to put into play. So for everything that you're measuring today, there's some logging code that you didn't think about that you're going to write tomorrow, but it's going to take some time to start collecting. So between now and the time when you have the data to run that A/B test or to act upon some quantitative data, there's a lot of things you can do in the interim. There's a lot of questions you can ask. And I like to think of these as the things that you can go home and start doing tomorrow at work, and the things that you can do when you've got a few minutes here and there, and the things that you can use to bring that culture of learning into your organization. So within your company, there are a lot of people who maybe haven't gone to a data school yet, who maybe are not super savvy about quant data, but they can still be asking questions when they're interacting with customers and the product. So we're going to go through some of the questions you can ask through the life cycle of building your app. And, literally, these are question templates that work. I've used them for a variety of products, from consumer to enterprise to really boring enterprise, and they work all along the way. So in the beginning, you have an idea. And a lot of times when I talk to people who are building apps, they say that this is the hardest part, is figuring out what that thing is that we ought to build. And you have an idea and you think, I should do this would be great, but it might not be, because we've all, those of us who've built products, lived through that period of building something that seemed like it was really great, only to find that it wasn't so much. So what do we do in this beginning stage? And this could be a brand new app, it could be a brand new company, or it could be just doing something new with the existing product and customers you have. Should we build it? Should we do this new thing? The first question I start with, talking to people who are your prospective customers, is literally not even a question. It's, tell me about how you're doing this thing today. So if you're offering a service to someone, if you're offering a feature to someone, say you have a photo sharing app, tell me about what you do with your pictures today. Tell me you've got a bunch of pictures on your phone there. How do you share those? Who sees them? And you want to get people to walk you through the story of what they're doing in their lives. And the reason you want to do this is that what people tell you when you ask, how are you doing this? Those are the things that are important to them. Those are the things that are important enough that they will learn to use a new app. They will download something. They might even go through a paywall. So by starting out in this open-ended fashion, you hear what's really important to people. I think that our instinct for most of us is to ask things like, do you want this? And that's actually a terrible question, because humans are really bad at answering that. Typically, if you ask me if I want something, I'm going to say yes. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to buy it. It doesn't even mean I'm going to download it from the App Store. So that level of do you want this is not going to lead you to invest your time wisely. If you say, tell me about how you do something, and I get really excited or I get really frustrated, now you're onto something. That's something you could build for. If you have existing customers, I think a lot of you know that they will come to you and they will demand features. When are you going to build this? We really want this. When is this going to come off the backlog? And having worked with a lot of enterprise customers, I know that there are so many features that we're never going to build, either because we don't have time or just because they're stupid features. But you can't tell people that. I learned that one the hard way early in my career. So your customer comes to you and says, I want this new thing. And you say, great, just to be sure I understand, if you already had it, how would your life be better? And people kind of stop at this one, because no one's ever asked them that. The typical vendor-customer interaction is the customer says, I want this, and the vendor says, we'll put it on the backlog. And then, you hope that they'll forget about it 6 months, 12 months later. But when you actually ask this, if you already had this, how would your life be better? You can see how it fits into their world. And you can see if the thing they're asking for is actually a good solution. And usually it's not, because your customers, it's not their job to figure out the thing that they want. It's their job to complain and to have these issues that they're going to solve. A lot of times when you ask this, you'll hear someone say, well, your competitor does it. And then you kind of smile and you give them a sec and you say, okay, great. If you were using this with Google or Uber or Lyft, how would your life be better? And you're repeating the question. And I cannot count the number of times that people have said, well, it would just be nice to have. And you can safely never build any of those things. It's amazing. You can cross things off your to-do list. You can make your backlog much shorter by crossing off the things that people say would just be nice to have, because they don't pay money for things that are just nice to have. The other thing you will hear sometimes is they say, I want X, and when you ask how it would make their life better, you realize that they don't need X at all. They need Y over here. They need Q back there. Or they need some feature that's actually already in your product today. You just haven't revealed it very well in the UI. So questions like this can save a ton of time. And perversely, they don't actually make people angry. They make people feel like you are listening to them more deeply. Because instead of just being that sort of dismissive, yeah, we'll think about it, you're actually saying, no, I want to hear more about your life and your needs and how we can make things better. So sometimes you will hear people give you a really good explanation of, if only I had this feature, this is how I could be better, smarter, taller. And you think, okay, awesome, we should build that. If anyone has a Q on the taller thing, by the way, I'll sign up right now. So your next phase, maybe you've got a sketch, maybe you've got a prototype, you've got something that's not quite an app yet, but it gives you an idea of what the solution's going to look like. What do you ask now? You don't have to like it, by the way, because what people like and what people use are not the same. I have seen way too many A/B tests to ever claim that this is true. If you ask people, do you like A or B, that doesn't tell you anything about what they'll use. If you ask, do you like this, that doesn't reveal whether they will buy it. So you show someone a prototype, paper prototype, maybe something you put together in something like InVision, and you say, what would you want to do here? And what you're looking for is them projecting their images of what they need in their life onto this paper, which is deliberately, very sparse and bare bones. What would you want to do here? So they say, well, I would just hope that it would do this. I would assume that if I clicked here, this thing would happen. And some people are not forthcoming, so you have to prompt them a little bit, like, what were you expecting when you saw this? Okay, well, where would you tap? Okay, well, what do you think would happen next? And you want to also do things like saying, show me how you would do this. And again, it's not necessarily the exact task that you're building, but the general sense. Show me about how you'd plan your travel. Show me about how you would communicate with your customers. For whatever that thing is, you want people to kind of take your idea, your prototype, and walk through what they're hoping it will become. And a lot of times, what you in your mind think is going to happen and what they tell you that they would want to do with it are two very different things. But as soon as you kind of show it as a demo, people give you feedback responding to that. So you see a demo, people are going to give you incremental feedback. If you show people kind of a very loose prototype and say, well, what do you think you should do with it? They will tell you a story that's a lot more useful. So you get to something, you've got a beta. You got some people, using it on Test Flight or Hockey App. People who are enthusiastic, they want this thing that you have. And now you got to try to figure out, is it working? Is it doing what it's supposed to? Is it meeting expectations? So one of the first things that I love is thinking about how long it took people to do something. And this is ideally less of a question and more of something you can measure with a funnel. But again, if you don't have that data, you have to do it question-wise. I like to think of the time to first value. And I think SC said something similar to that this morning. It's the time between someone experiencing your product, your app, and the time where they're like, yes, I got something out of this. The shorter that is, the more likely people are to want to use it and be retained. And I've seen that in product after product. So how long did it take someone to get to that moment? And sometimes you need to ask what that moment should be. Well, what were you hoping for? What do you think the payoff's going to be here? Because it's not always what you expect. It may be a friend request, it may be someone liking something, it may be someone downloading something. What that level of interaction is, what that success is not yours to define, it's your customers. And what did you expect to be able to do? So someone who has just gotten an app has this idea in their mind, based on this little description, here's what I'm going to get out of it, which may or may not pan out. So you have some people using it. I like to ask, what did you come here expecting to do? And did this live up to your expectations? And when there's a gap in there, you can kind of say, well, what else were you expecting? Well, what are you using in the interim? Is there a workaround? Sometimes you'll have people who the option is that they're just not using anything. I wished it would do this, but I guess that's okay. For other people, it's, I wished I could do this, and so I'm going to go look for other apps. So you really want to get that sense of expectation versus reality, and how can you come close to that and then even exceed it. And that's really, when people talk about customer delight, that's what delight is. It's taking that expectation someone had and just blowing right past it. Value. So you've got some people using it, you've figured out that maybe you're not entirely disappointing them, in fact, they're kind of excited. How do we get more of those people? How do we increase the value of the thing you've built? One of the tricky things when you're looking at usage and growth is that depending on how good your initial hook is, that growth has kind of a trailing effect of, is it going to stick? So if you can find people who have used your app, and a lot of times, if you can respond to App Store reviews, this is a great way. If you've got people writing you customer support, if you've got people following you on Twitter, to ask them, in the past week, how have you used this product? You don't want to say how many times. You probably got that in your logging, if you've got logging in place. But you want to know how it fits into their lives. Because the more deeply something is integrated into someone's social life, into their development process, into their routine, the more likely it is to stick. Years ago, I was working on Kissmetrics, web analytics tool, and I noticed kind of a weird thing in the data, which is that a lot of people who were logging in every single day would then go on to churn out. And I thought, that's really weird. And these are daily active users, and yet they're not resubscribing. And I thought maybe there was a glitch in the data, because it just seemed completely unrealistic. And meanwhile, there were people who were logging in weekly who were continuing to pay up. And I was thinking to myself, I don't understand what's going on here. And the beauty of data is it tells you exactly what works and doesn't work, but it doesn't tell you why. And so I went and I started talking to some of these people. It turns out that the daily users really liked our dashboards because they were really pretty. And so every morning they would call up the dashboards and kind of look at them and smile and go, huh, and then go about their day. And that was the extent of their usage with our app. It wasn't serving a deep need. They were just kind of vaguely like, oh, look at those bars, they look pretty. Oh, look, another shiny object. Not really worth paying a lot for that. So if I'd looked purely at the usage frequency, I wouldn't have gotten much. But by asking, how have you used it, I got a sort of, oh, I look at the dashboards every day. And it wasn't even a hesitant response. People were like, oh yeah, it's great, I look at the dashboards every day. Okay, that's interesting. What do you do with them? Oh, well, I don't know. I guess if I see something weird, I tell one of the engineers. It's sort of a very vague response. On the other end of the spectrum, we had people when we said, what are you doing when you log in once a week? And they say, oh, that's the end of our sprint review. And we look at the results of our experiments and we see what happened and we plan for the next week and the entire company is standing around my laptop looking at your app. That's where you're providing value. But it's not something we ever would have gotten out of pure quant. And again, someone said this earlier today, how would you describe the value you're getting? So you've got some users, they're using your product, clearly they're doing it for a reason, but you need to know what it is that they're actually getting out of it, because as someone who's built a lot of products, the things that are the most valuable to your users don't usually correlate with the things that were the hardest to build. How would you describe the value you're getting? Take that, use it in your marketing material, double down on that. A lot of times you're going to hear something that sounds kind of weird or vague. A long time ago, I worked on a personal finance platform. We had this great automatic transaction categorization, kind of like Mint, is one of the precursors to Mint. We thought it was really great. It was super hard to build. How would you describe the value you were getting? You know what people said? They said, I like this app, it gives me a feeling of control. Finance people, that's like a weird, touchy-feely thing for people to say. And yet, person after person, these people who would tell me about how they would use QuickBooks on a Saturday afternoon for fun would look at our app and say, I like the feeling of control I get. All right, fine. A/B tested a feeling of control versus all of our awesome features. Guess which one won? Feeling of control. So whatever your customers are saying, that's how they're talking about you to other people, and that's what will resonate with other people. Ask that. A good time to do this is, again, whenever you have an interaction with someone. You have a customer meeting. They're asking you a question into your support help desk. They wrote an App Store review. They tweeted at you. Respond to them and then say, by the way, could I ask you one more question? It seems like you're using this. How would you describe the value you're getting? It is amazing how often people will take the time to write you a response if you have already answered a question that they asked of you. How do we get bigger? How do we expand beyond? So we build something out, we've got some people using it, we figured out what they like about it. How do we get more and more and more of them? That's what we're all trying to do. That is odd. And I feel like there was a slide here. So, what do we do with this? One of the things we can ask is, who else should use a product like this? What do you think we should be doing next? And my favorite one, which is, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about, not your product, but the whole area that you're working in, whether it's personal finance, whether it's photo sharing, whether it's finding childcare. Look, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about how you do this, doesn't have to be feasible, what would it be? This question has the power to unlock people telling you things that they didn't think were possible, but as product people, you know are possible. So I have seen this in a whole bunch of contexts, from the very consumer to the very boring enterprise. Recently, I was talking to a guy, PhD in some kind of fluid mechanics science thing, Rockwell Automation, very serious guy, doing an interview. He's got up on the whiteboard, he's drawing schematics of how they do their factory machines. I'm trying to take notes desperately. Most of it's going way over my head. Talking to him about how his company uses data. I asked him this magic wand question, and this very serious man sat there for a second. He's like, don't think I've been asked this before. And he said, okay, if I could wave a magic wand, I would want to know what all of our customers are doing with each feature, but I wouldn't want to know their personal information because I shouldn't know that. So I would want to know for each industry and each job title what feature they're using and how often they're using it. He's like, but that's not possible. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure it actually is. So writing all this down frantically. But that's a level of detail that in the previous half an hour we had not gotten through at all. But it was by asking this question that was sort of ridiculous and freed him from the constraints of asking for incremental things. Like, I know you provide this, I want this plus 5%. That's typically what your customers will tell you. But you ask something a little bit crazy, and they give you these kind of crazy answers. And within that is where there's a whole world of possibility. So, if you had asked me 10, 15 years ago, if I could wave a magic wand and change anything about summoning a taxi, I don't know. I'd just press a button and one would just show up at my house. And that's where we are today. So your customers don't know where the future will take them, but that's our job. We just have to get them to tell us what their problems are and how they make decisions and the kinds of things that are frustrating them, and we can take that and turn it into the raw material that makes really great products. So that slide is completely, there we go. Now it is legible. All right, so you can learn a little bit every day by taking the opportunities when people are already paying attention to you and asking them a question, and I'm going to do the same. So if you would like these slides, or if you'd like to answer any follow-up questions, or if you're willing to help me out with some of my research, the bit.ly/learnhabit, you can get the slides. If you'd like to sign up to be part of any of my research, then I would welcome you to do that. And happy to take questions, or people can make a beeline for the drinks now.
Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. We got a couple of minutes for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if anyone wants to raise their hand and shout anything out, if they've got anything. One back there.
Woo.
I'm guessing the answer is this depends, but over what length of time do you see one cycle of this sentence?
Okay, so the question, over what cycle of time does this take place? Yes, it depends. But you know what cycle of time you're operating in. These can happen in kind of big swaths and little swaths. So, you know, you look at something like that and it looks like an end-to-end app, but it could be an end-to-end feature. So with teams that I've worked with, something like this might be as short as a sprint, right? In a 2-week cycle, you could very quickly ask customers who are already talking to you, you know, what are you doing today? How would you like to do this? Walk me through how you're using the app today, and kind of very, very quickly cycle through questions like this. It could be over the course of creating an entire application. So when I've launched new software or like new lines of business, these types of questions might be taking place over 6 to 9 months. I work with some innovation centers within big enterprises who tend to take like 3-month chunks of time where they take people out of their current companies and plug them into a new environment. And so they're spending a couple weeks at each of these stages.
Cool. Anybody else? Quick final questions? Right, well, let's one more round of applause for Cindy then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.